Welcome, everyone. I'm here today with Michael Goldstein, who is the Chief Medical Officer of Ocular Therapeutix and also Associate Professor of Ophthalmology at the New England Eye Center, Tufts University School of Medicine, and co-director of the Cornea and Anterior Segment Service. Mike, welcome to Retina Synthesis.
Thanks, Carmen.
Can you tell us a little bit about Ocular Therapeutix?
Sure. So Ocular Therapeutix is a drug delivery company focused in ophthalmology. We have a platform based around a hydrogel, and the idea is to take drugs in ophthalmology that have worked well and make them work better. I think we all know that it's challenging for patients to take eye drops, and so one of our goals is to make eye drops obsolete. We also know that patients have a hard time coming in and complying with monthly intravitreal injections, and so we want to obsolete immediate release injections. So the way we do that is we take the hydrogel and we marry that with drugs that we know have been working well, and we can then leverage that platform either as a intracanalicular insert in order to deliver eye drops better, or inject them directly into the eye. In the case of AMD or DME, to get prolonged release. And we also have a glaucoma program where we inject travoprost into the intracameral area, and we can get extended release of travoprost with a single implant.
You're doing lots of work in wet macular degeneration. What's your vision for the treatment of wet macular degeneration going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's obviously been very revolutionary in terms of the ability to treat patients with wet AMD with anti-VEGF therapy. It works extremely well. I think the primary issue that patients have is that it's very, very hard to keep up with a regimen of every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks. So the big unmet need, as we see it, is for drugs that have longer durability, primarily. I would say secondarily, there's probably also a need for drugs with new mechanisms of action beyond anti-VEGF therapy. So we have 2 programs working in back of the eye. So one is a tyrosine kinase inhibitor, axitinib, that we've developed for intravitreal injection, starting with wet age-related macular degeneration. We currently have an implant that's in phase 1 trials, and the expected target product profile is to release the drug over a minimum of 6 months. And so that program is progressing well. We also have a partnership with Regeneron working with aflibercept and marrying the aflibercept with our hydrogel and injecting it into the suprachoroidal space. So that's a program that's currently in preclinical development.
Dr. David Boyer presented some very promising results from your phase 1 trial. Would you like to talk a little bit about what he reported?
Yeah, absolutely. So that phase 1 trial has 3 different cohorts that we're injecting in Australia. All patients in the trial have wet AMD, and unlike many other trials currently, in order to get in this trial, you actually have to have active fluid, a certain amount of fluid to get into the trial. We did allow patients who are both naive as well as those who have had prior anti-VEGF therapy into the trial. And what we've shown across the 3 cohorts is that we've seen no safety concerns to date, so it's been well tolerated. At the 200 microgram dose, we saw stabilization, meaning the fluid didn't really go away. It didn't increase over time, but it didn't really go away in a significant period of time. In the cohort 2 group, we did have a number of patients where the fluid went away completely, and some of these patients were patients who had anti-VEGF therapy for monthly or actually in some cases even every 2 weeks for over a year. About half the patients made it to 6 months without the need for any additional rescue therapy. And we're currently enrolling cohort 3, which is the highest dose, and we showed that the first patient in the highest dose cohort to get to beyond 2 months. That patient showed complete resolution of all fluid by 2 months, and that's been now maintained out to 4.5 months.
So Dr. Boyer reported that you were thinking about a protocol in which there was one dose of anti-VEGF followed by the tyrosinase kinase inhibitor. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what we've noticed across the 3 cohorts, and we're still enrolling the 3rd cohort and need to understand more with the highest dose cohort, but what we've noticed is that there's a lag of about up to 2 months between when we inject the tyrosine kinase inhibitor and we see resolution of fluid. So to account for that lag period, we would in the phase 2 trial, the design would be to start with anti-VEGF induction, have the patients get dry, and then randomize patients to either the tyrosine kinase inhibitor or standard of care aflibercept, then follow those patients over a period of time.
So are you thinking about 3 loading doses or a single dose? Have you decided yet on that?
So we haven't fully nailed down the design, but the current design is actually not 3 loading doses. It would be 1 dose prior to the TKI, we'd give the TKI, and then 1 dose a month after. So 2 doses rather than 3. But we're still working out the specifics on that.
Ophthalmologists understand how anti-VEGF molecules work, but they really are not familiar with tyrosinase kinase inhibitors. Can you talk a little bit about this class of drug and how it treats neovascularization in the choroid?
Yeah, so the advantage of tyrosine kinase inhibitors is that they may have a broader spectrum of activity than typical anti-VEGF drugs. They're working against all 3 anti-VEGF receptors. It also has activity against PDGF. And so, it works at the receptor level and then works intracellularly. So it's very possible that, and we actually think that the way this would work is that you would use the anti-VEGF medication to sop up the ligand, get rid of all the anti-VEGF, and that the TKI can then be used chronically and repetitively in order to keep patients in a dry state.
Very exciting. How far away do you think you are from a phase 2 trial?
So we are targeting phase 2. We're targeting actually 2 phase 2 trials. So 1 in the US, one in Australia, and we're targeting mid-year next year.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any inkling of what the design of that phase 2 would be like, or not?
Yeah, I think very similar to what we said. So we'd start with so in the current phase 1 trial, we're starting with patients who are wet. We're treating with active fluid. We're treating as monotherapy, and we're seeing if we can get rid of the fluid. To our knowledge, that's very different than what other people have shown with tyrosine kinase inhibitors, where they've basically started with patients who are dry and maintain that dryness. So, but we wanted to see what's the biological activity as monotherapy, and we've demonstrated in a number of patients that as monotherapy, no anti-VEGF, we can completely get rid of fluid, which again I think is different than what other people have shown with tyrosine kinase inhibitors. That said, as I think that the use of this will really be after anti-VEGF induction therapy, and so that's what the phase 2 design will mimic: anti-VEGF induction therapy and then chronic maintenance with the TKI.
How can you be sure that the hydrogel is releasing drug at 6 months?
So it's a good question. We've got preclinical studies in, primarily in rabbits, a little bit of data in monkeys, and we can show an extended release of the drug actually in rabbits out to a year. And why longer? It's because the viscosity of the vitreous is much greater in rabbits than it is in humans. In humans, we don't have local PK. We can follow the hydrogel, and we can see when the hydrogel bioerodes, and that's about 9 to 10.5 months, somewhere in that period, because we can actually visualize it. And then we can follow the PD marker, so looking for anatomically at OCT and seeing how long we can maintain patients in a dry state. I should mention in Dr. Boyer's presentation, we showed the furthest patient out in the cohort 2 group, so the mid group, is out to 11 months. We have a patient now out to 11 months with a single implant where they've maintained a dry state, and they're still being followed. But in terms of how long the drug actually releases, that's still we're still working that out.
Do you customize the hydrogel for the application that you're concerned with?
Yeah, great question. So the hydrogel is incredibly flexible. It was, sort of the basis of the company. It was designed by a gentleman named Amar Sohwani, and he has used the hydrogel in numerous different companies, really as a device. So it's been all over the body, approved for use primarily as a sealant or as a spacer. So in neurosurgery, in the GI system, and a number of other places. Ocular is the only company that's using it in the eye, and Ocular is the only company to use it for drug delivery. But the experience with the hydrogel is in actually now millions of patients in multiple parts of the other parts of the body. The fundamental hydrogel, and it should be really hydrogels, is really the basis of everything we do. We have an approved product called Dextenza, which is approved to treat post-operative pain and inflammation, so approved about a year and a half ago. And we've now dosed over 30,000 patients with Dextenza. And what that drug does is it's placed in the canaliculus and it releases steroid for approximately 30 days after surgery. But to your question, depending on the mix of pegs that we use in the hydrogel, we can tailor how long the hydrogel stays around for, depending on how the drug is linked or not linked in the hydrogel matrix. We can control the drug release. We can do steady state release. We can do burst release, and we can differ, drug release compared to the hydrogel breakdown. The other key is that the hydrogel will break down through bulk hydrolysis and turn into water over time. So no need to remove it. If you had to remove it for some reason, you could, but you don't have to remove it. So there's a lot of flexibility in the hydrogel platform. And, frankly, it's why I came to the company, not because of Dextenza, which was at that point was sort of the furthest along when I arrived 3 years ago, but really it's to leverage the flexibility of the hydrogel for ophthalmic products in order to deliver them in a better manner.
Can you tell us a little bit about the aflibercept project?
Yeah, so it's a long-standing project with Regeneron. We are working with them on aflibercept in order to get a prolonged release targeting 6 months with a single injection. As you know, it's challenging with biologics in order to get an extended release in terms of aggregation. We initially had a formulation that was for intravitreal injection, but the amount of hydrogel that you had to put into the vitreous was pretty large. And so it's now recently been announced that we've actually switched that to a suprachoroidal program. And so working with Regeneron to deliver them a suprachoroidal formulation with the hydrogel. And again, that's now in preclinical development.
So, but your main focus is on the TKI project?
TKI is wholly owned by us and wholly controlled by us. So our main efforts as a company are toward the TKI because we control all parts of it. Our R&D group is working closely with Regeneron to develop an appropriate formulation for them for suprachoroidal delivery, but they control the clinical development of that program.
Well, I think you've got two exciting projects underway, and I think we're going to be hearing more from Ocular Therapeutix over the next 2 years. And this treatment model makes a lot of sense. And you have an established delivery system, and you have an established molecule. So those are great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's move on to our next topic, which is you. You've worked, I think, now for 3 companies as CMO?
That's correct.
3 companies at CMO. At the same time, you've worked at the New England Eye Center as a corneal surgeon.
That's
So
correct.
to make that happen, you've had to have understanding from the academic administration and the corporate administration. How has that worked out? Is there a tension, or is it been smooth sailing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been great. And, I think it's a privilege to be able to work in ophthalmology as a field. It's a privilege to be able to work in industry, and it's a privilege to be able to do both. It sort of happened. I would say it wasn't a big plan. It almost happened accidental. I think like a lot of people, I started out in academics, initially at the University of Florida, where I was actually head of refractive surgery. And then when you went down to Miami, you took away some of the cornea people at Tufts, and Jay took over and recruited me to Tufts. I have always been sort of interested in translational medicine, and had the opportunity, have had great opportunity to work with tremendous researchers over time. Initially at the University of Florida with Greg Schultz, and then at Tufts with Narajahan Panjwani. And through those collaborations, was able to get involved with a company that spun out of Tufts, and we licensed to Senju. And through that process, brought in a business development consultant who helped us with that. And a number of years later, that person became a partner at Third Rock Ventures, and started an ophthalmic company, and called me up one day and said, hey, we're starting this ophthalmology company focused in biologics, would you have an interest? And so it's just funny how those things come around. So, at that point, I was, as you said, co-director of the Cornea service. I was head of the residency program at Tufts. And I basically had said to them, yeah, I could give you a little bit of time, but I just don't have a lot of time. And they said, well, let's make you an offer. And they basically carved out a half day a week to start consulting, and it's built from there. And then as we developed that company, we wanted to go public, and the CEO at the time was Abby Selnicker, who is now running Third Rock Ventures. And Abby said to me, well, how about if you can help us with the IPO process? And I said, can you take a week off to help with or a month off to help with the IPO process? And I thought, it's a great technology. There's great investors, great leadership. This would be a great activity to be able to do. So I said, fine. And then a week or two later, I came back, and Abby said, well, how about if you took 2 months off? We need you before the IPO, and we need you for a week, for a month after the IPO. I thought about it, and I said, okay, 2 months, that sounds reasonable. I'll do it. And then about a month later, Abby came to me and said, well, how about if you took a year off and helped us through the IPO and the follow-up? And I took a deep breath and thought, that's not really where I thought this was going. But again, thought great opportunity, really cool program. These things just don't come around very often. And had a conversation with Jay Duker, who is head of ophthalmology, chair of ophthalmology at Tufts. Jay is an incredibly forward-thinking person. His view really is hire really good people and see what they can create. Jay said, well, we don't actually have a sabbatical program at Tufts, but we can probably work something out if this is what you want to do. So we worked out an arrangement where I would take a year off by working full-time at the company 4 days a week, and would decrease my time at Tufts New England Eye Center to a day a week. It had to go through the corporate office at Tufts, and they signed off on it. And it's been great. And it's really, I think it's worked out really well. I mean, I really appreciate the flexibility that Jay has been able to show. I think it's very forward thinking for an academic chair to be able to allow that flexibility. But I think when you look at New England Eye Center and you look at the people he's been able to recruit, and you were able to recruit, we've got a lot of very entrepreneurial, smart people, and doing a lot of really interesting things. I think on the industry side, there's a lot of value to keeping your hand in seeing patients, and the way you think about the delivering medications, the way you think about drug development, the way you think about the applicability, all of that, I think it's very helpful to sort of keep your hands in seeing patients. And then the last thing, and sort of the unexpected thing, is that patients love talking about it. Patients love hearing about, what's on the cutting edge, and that we're sort of doing, not just research, but research that actually, could really benefit them at a company, working with a company that can actually deliver things that are, going to directly benefit patients in the near term. So, so I think it's been great. That said, there are certainly challenges, and I tell people I've basically got 2 full-time jobs, and it's interesting to balance.
What advice do you have to colleagues that would like to become a chief medical officer at an ophthalmic company?
So, I think it's a great thing to do, and I think you need to think about why you want to do it. What it's not is easier, and it's not fewer hours. What it is, it's very collegial. There's, everything is very team oriented. Everyone brings their expertise. And I think clinician scientists bring a lot of value to the process, and can get a lot out of it. But everything's a trade-off, and it's fun taking care of patients, and it's fun doing surgery. And that stuff just has to be cut back, and particularly the surgical side. It's hard to keep up a busy surgical practice when you're part-time. So that's the trade-off. The other big trade-off, which I think most physicians don't really understand, is when you move into industry, you really have a boss. So when you're an ophthalmologist or a physician, your boss is really your patients, and as long as you do a good job, most chairmen, I think, stay out of your way, and but really you run your own practice in many ways. But when you go into industry, it really is, there is a hierarchy. You're part of that hierarchy. The chairman or CEO is very important. The board's very important, and so there is this hierarchy that you need to respect and be aware of, and be in alignment with. But and I guess the final thing I would say is, if you are interested, it's definitely a great thing to do. There are not many people that work in ophthalmology that have drug development experience, and there are plenty of companies that are looking for people to do to have that skill set. So there are lots of job opportunities for those who are interested.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for sharing a story of Ocular Therapeutix. That's exciting. And just as exceptional is your career story. It's fantastic. And I know that our viewers will enjoy seeing it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Carmen. I really appreciate it. Thanks for including me.